What if the very reason most people stay broke isn't lack of intelligence or talent, but a failure to think differently? The truth is, most people are busy surviving. They wake up reacting, spend emotionally, chase comfort, and avoid responsibility. And all the while, the 3%, the few, do something different. They trade impulse for intention, distraction for discipline, and entertainment for education. They don't chase money. They attract it by becoming a person of value. You don't rise by chance. You rise by choice. And the first choice is to stop thinking like the crowd. If you want to escape the 97%, you have to walk away from them. This is not just about how you earn money. It's about how you think about life. Because wealth begins in the mind long before it shows up in the bank. They say money talks, but let me tell you, money also walks. It walks away quietly from the pockets of those who don't know how to command it. Now here's a little secret most never learn. Wealth isn't about how much you make, it's about how much you keep and grow. The poor spend their money and try to save what's left. The rich save first and spend what's left. That's the shift. That's the difference between 97% and 3%. See, most people wake up, get their paycheck, and immediately divide it up like a pie for the world: rent, bills, groceries, a few wants. And if anything's left, maybe they save it. Maybe. But the wealthy, they operate with a different rule. They understand that the first person who deserves to be paid is themselves. Not out of ego, but out of principle, out of future, out of discipline. And when I say pay yourself first, I don't mean treat yourself to a new gadget or a meal out. I mean you take the first 10% or 15% if you're serious and you assign it to your future. That money becomes your soldier. You put it to work, into investments, into an emergency fund, into something that grows. Because here's the deal. Every dollar you earn is a little employee. The goal is to make those employees go out, multiply, and come back with more. When I started out, I wasn't making much. And I'll admit, when I first heard this principle, I said what most people say: how can I save 10% when I can barely live on 100%? But then it hit me. If I couldn't live on 90%, I was already in trouble. So I made the shift. And something strange happened. I became more creative with the 90%. I learned to cut waste. I became more intentional with my spending. And most importantly, I started to feel in control. That's the real benefit of paying yourself first. It trains your mind to lead, not follow. Think about it. If you work hard, give everyone else your money, and leave yourself with crumbs, what are you telling your subconscious? You're saying, I'm not the priority. But when you pay yourself first, you're saying, my future matters. That's a powerful message, and your behavior will rise to match it. Now, some people say, I'll save when I make more. But let me be honest, that's just poor thinking in disguise. If you can't manage $100, you won't manage $10,000. Wealth isn't about numbers, it's about habits. So start now. Start small. Start with $5, $10, $50, whatever it is. Build the muscle. Because that habit, that's the seed of financial freedom. So don't wait to have more before you do more. You do more now with what you have. Pay yourself first, and then make the rest work for you. Most people don't have a money problem, they have a thinking problem. It's not the size of their income that's keeping them broke, it's the direction of their dollars. The 97% they spend emotionally. They see money as a way to feel better, to escape, to reward themselves temporarily. But the 3%, they invest intentionally. They don't spend money to feel something, they spend money to build something. Let me ask you this, when you get paid, what's your first thought? Is it, what can I buy? Or is it, what can I build? That one question separates the poor mindset from the wealthy one. Because broke thinkers buy relief. A new pair of shoes, a fancy meal, the latest gadget, something to ease the stress, to celebrate getting through the week. And don't get me wrong, there's a time for rewards. But when that becomes your pattern, your default mode, your financial life starts to look like a treadmill, lots of motion, but no progress. The 3% understand that every dollar is a soldier, and every soldier has a mission. You can send that dollar out to entertain you for the moment, or you can assign it a task to grow, to multiply, to bring reinforcements. Spend enough dollars building someone else's brand and you're financing their dreams. But assign your dollars wisely and you begin financing your own future. I remember walking into a department store one day and seeing a suit I really wanted. It looked sharp, felt powerful, but I stopped myself and thought, is this suit going to make me richer or just look richer? That one question turned me around and led me back to my books, back to my savings, back to building something real. Because here's the truth. When you chase symbols of wealth, before you've built substance, you end up broke with style. The poor mindset is always looking for something that feels good now. The wealthy mindset is asking, quote, will this still be smart 5 years from now? One mindset is reaction. The other is intention. One is emotional spending. The other is strategic investing. The challenge is this. Most emotional spending comes in small decisions. It's not the big splurge once a year, it's the daily drip. The coffee here, the impulse buy there. But the 3% track, measure, and manage, they create financial rules to guard their future from their feelings. If they want something, they pause. If they want to celebrate, they still invest a portion. They don't let feelings run their finances. They let principles run their lives. If you want to live different, you've got to think different. Start treating your money like a tool, not a trophy. Ask your dollars to go to work, not just go to waste. It's not how much you make, it's how well you command what you make. That's how the 3% think, and that's how they win. Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. That simple phrase is the foundation for how wealthy minds deal with setbacks. Because here's the truth. Everybody faces failure. Everybody takes a hit now and then. The difference is how you respond. The poor mindset resents the loss. The wealthy mindset extracts the lesson. Same experience, different interpretation. One turns pain into pity, the other turns pain into power. I remember early in my journey, I invested in a little venture a friend brought me into. I was excited, thought I did my homework, but within 6 months, it fell apart. I lost money. I couldn't really afford to lose at the time. I had two options, complain about the unfairness of it all, or open up a notebook and write down everything I had missed. And I'll tell you something, what I learned from that one failure became worth far more than the money I lost. I learned due diligence. I learned about timing. I learned about people. I learned that enthusiasm is not a substitute for wisdom. You see, failure is a teacher if you're willing to sit in its class. But most people leave too early. They feel the sting of the setback and rush to escape it, rather than extract something from it. They blame the market, the economy, their partner, and by doing that, they trade away their power, because if it's always someone else's fault, you never get better. Let me tell you what changed my life when I finally understood the difference between making a living and building a fortune. For years, I was trapped in the same routine as most people. Work hard, get paid, spend, repeat. I thought the solution to my problems was a higher wage. And sure, a raise feels good, but here's the truth, it's still just a wage. It stops when you stop. It's not freedom, it's not wealth. It's simply survival on a nicer level. I had to learn that if every dollar I earn depends on every hour I give, I'm not building wealth. I'm renting my life out by the hour. And that's not how the wealthy think. The turning point came when someone explained to me the concept of assets, not in theory, but in practice. They said, if your money doesn't work while you sleep, you'll work until you die. That landed like a brick. And so I started shifting my mindset from income, earning, to asset building. That's where the wealthy live. Wages make you a living, but profits make you a fortune. The wealthy aren't focused only on what they earn, they're focused on what they own. They ask, how do I create something once that pays me again and again? Now, building assets doesn't mean you need $1 million or a Wall Street degree. It starts small. Maybe you buy a piece of real estate and rent it out. Maybe you write an ebook that sells while you sleep. Maybe you create a product, a business, or even just a system that multiplies your time. I remember when I first set up a small business that operated without me. At first, it barely covered the rent. But I'll tell you, the feeling of making money without clocking in, that was the moment I knew I was on the right path. I wasn't just working. I was building. And there's a critical distinction to learn. Earned income versus passive income. Earned income is what you get for your labor. It's linear. You work, you get paid, you stop working, the income stops. Passive income, on the other hand, is exponential. You work once, and it keeps paying you. It's income that's not tied to your daily effort. That's the goal. Not just a bigger paycheck, but a smarter structure. You see, the rich don't work harder, they work smarter. They convert effort into equity. They use time to buy freedom, not just comforts. If I could give you one challenge today, it would be this. Take just 10% of your effort and invest it into building something that will pay you tomorrow. Not just a paycheck, something that pays you long after the work is done. Because when you start thinking like the wealthy, you stop chasing income and start creating independence. One of the greatest turning points in my financial life came when I stopped guessing and started measuring. For years I lived by feel. If there was still money in my wallet at the end of the week, I figured I was doing just fine. If I could still buy lunch or coffee, I assumed I was in control. But let me tell you, that's not control, that's luck. And luck is not a strategy. It's not how wealth is built. Wealth is built through clarity, through intention, and through measurement. Someone once told me, "You can't manage what you don't measure." That line hit me like a thunderbolt. I thought I was being responsible. I worked hard, paid my bills, and stayed out of major trouble. But the truth was, I didn't really know where my money was going. I couldn't tell you how much I spent on food last month. I had no clue what percentage of my income went to things that actually moved me forward versus things that just filled the moment. And that's where most people are operating their financial life by feel, not fact. The wealthy don't do that. They know where every dollar is going down to the cent, because every dollar has a job. Either it's working for you, or it's disappearing quietly without your permission. So I did something simple, but it changed everything. I started writing it all down, first in a little notebook, later on index cards, and eventually in a basic spreadsheet. Income, expenses, savings, investments, everything got logged. At first it felt tedious, but then something interesting happened. I started seeing patterns. I saw how often I spent small amounts on things that didn't matter. I saw how much of my income was being eaten up by habits, not needs. And I started making better decisions, not from willpower, but from awareness. Awareness is powerful. When you track your money, you start to realize that most of your financial stress doesn't come from lack of income, it comes from lack of clarity. Most people don't have a money problem. They have a money management problem. And the first step to managing is tracking. What gets tracked gets transformed. Because now you're not acting in the dark. You're operating from data. You have a mirror showing you exactly where you stand, and that mirror doesn't lie. So my advice is simple. Start a financial journal. It doesn't need to be fancy. Just write it down, what came in, what went out, where it went, and how you feel about it. Do it weekly. Review it monthly. And over time, it becomes more than a habit. It becomes a lifestyle. You stop drifting, and you start directing. Because when you know your numbers, you know your life. And from there, you can begin to build it. One of the first things I had to learn, and I mean really learn deep down, was this. You don't get paid for the hour. You get paid for the value you bring to the hour. And let me tell you, once that idea sinks in, it changes everything. Most people are conditioned to think in terms of hours. Work 8 hours, get paid for 8, work more, get more. And while that might sound fair, it's not how wealth works. That's how wages work. That's how you survive. But if you want to grow, really grow, you've got to make a shift. Stop thinking about effort and start thinking about value. I remember back when I was just starting out, I was putting in the hours. I'd work hard, stay late, say yes to everything. But no matter how many hours I gave, I still wasn't getting ahead. Until one day, I heard a man say, "You're working too hard for too little. You're trading time when you should be building value." And that hit me. I realized I was stuck in a model that could never produce wealth, only fatigue. So I began to ask different questions, not how can I do more, but how can I become more? How can I develop skills that allow me to command greater returns for the same amount of time? And that was the beginning of a different path. I started reading, I started listening, I sought out mentors. I worked on communication, because if you can't express your ideas clearly, your value is invisible. I studied leadership because people follow clarity and strength. I learned about sales because everything in life involves influence. And I learned about investing because the wealthy don't just work for money, they make money work for them. Let me tell you something. Once I started growing my value, I didn't have to chase opportunities, they came to me. People pay for solutions, not sweat. They pay for insight, not hours. They pay for results. So the key isn't to add more hours to your day, it's to add more value to your hours. If you can bring something to the table that few others can, your income will reflect it. That's not theory. That's the market. And the market is always watching, always measuring, always paying based on perceived value. Now, I'm not saying hard work doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But it's not enough by itself. Hard work must be matched with smart development. You've got to keep sharpening the saw. The real secret? Study while others sleep. Grow while others coast. And every new skill, every new layer of understanding adds weight to what you offer. It turns your time into treasure. Because in the end, money follows value. Not noise, not motion, not effort, value. And that is entirely in your hands. One of the most powerful lessons I ever learned wasn't about money, it was about identity. Because here's the truth. You'll never earn beyond the person you believe yourself to be. If deep down you believe wealth isn't for you, that you're meant to just get by, that your background or upbringing or education limits your future, you'll sabotage every opportunity that comes your way. Not because you're not capable, but because your identity won't allow you to receive more than it believes it deserves. And that's where the real transformation begins, not in your wallet, but in your mind. I remember when I first started on this journey, I didn't grow up around wealth. I didn't know the language of money. I didn't know the habits. I knew hard work, sure. But every time I got close to progress, some part of me whispered, "This isn't for you." And so I'd slip back. The problem wasn't money. The problem was how I saw myself. Until one day I was told something that shook me. You can make a living, or you can design a life. And it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I had been making a living, but I had not been designing anything. I had been reacting to life, not shaping it. And I realized if I wanted a better life, I had to become a better designer. But to design anything well, you have to believe you're worthy of holding the pen. So I started small. I began to study the wealthy, not just their actions, but their mindset. How do they think? What do they believe? What do they say to themselves and others? I noticed something remarkable. The wealthy didn't speak in terms of lack, they spoke in terms of opportunity. They didn't talk about surviving the week, they talked about building the decade. They didn't think in limits, they thought in leverage. And so I started to adopt that way of thinking. At first it felt strange, almost like I was playing a role, but I kept at it. I told myself daily, I am a builder, not a beggar. Not someone waiting for a break, but someone creating one. Not someone hoping for money, but someone becoming the kind of person money is attracted to. I looked in the mirror and said, I am capable of wealth. I am disciplined. I am strategic. I create value. And slowly, my actions began to match my words. I started saving. I started investing in myself. I started taking different kinds of risks calculated, not reckless. You see, behavior follows belief. You change the identity, the results will follow. And this isn't about arrogance, it's about alignment. If you see yourself as someone who just gets by, your behavior will echo that. But if you see yourself as someone who builds, creates, contributes, and grows, your habits, your strategies, and your financial results will begin to reflect that identity. That's how you outgrow your limitations. Not by waiting for a miracle, but by becoming a new version of you. The big mistake most people make when it comes to wealth is thinking it arrives in one big wave like a windfall, a lucky break, a perfect investment. But wealth doesn't work that way. Real wealth, lasting wealth, is built in inches, not miles. It's not one huge decision, it's 1,000 small ones. It's a lifestyle of consistent, intentional action. And here's the principle. Success is simply a few simple disciplines practiced every day. I learned that the hard way. When I was broke, I didn't just have a money problem, I had a habit problem. I spent without tracking. I read entertainment instead of education. I hoped things would change, but I wasn't doing anything daily to change them. I was living by chance, not by choice. Then I was taught that discipline is the foundation of all success, not dramatic changes. Not one-time effort, just small things done daily. So I began by changing my mornings. Before the world started calling, before the noise of the day kicked in, I'd take 10 minutes to review my goals. Not just glance at them, but speak them out loud. I reminded myself what I was building and why. That one habit brought my focus back every day. It anchored me. Then I added another, reading 10 pages a day of a good financial or personal development book. That doesn't sound like much, right? But that's 300 pages a month. That's a book. That's 12 books a year. And one good idea, one shift in mindset can completely change your financial trajectory. It did for me. Another ritual I committed to was automatic investing. Every payday before I spent a dime, I had a portion go into savings and investments. I didn't wait to see what was left over. I paid myself first. That's not just a habit. That's a philosophy. And it builds wealth in the background while you live your life. I also looked at my spending habits not to cut joy, but to cut waste. Each week I'd find just one thing I didn't need. Maybe it was that extra subscription, that overpriced coffee, that impulse buy. And instead of just saving the money, I redirected it. I turned it into an investment. Small, yes, but done every week. Those little leaks turned into little streams, and streams become rivers. And you know what happens when you do these things over time? Not just more money, but more confidence, more clarity. You start to feel like the kind of person who's in control. You're no longer guessing you're growing. Wealth becomes a natural outcome, not a distant dream. That's the secret. Wealth isn't built in a day. It's built daily, through micro decisions that compound, through rituals that align your time with your values. So don't wait for a big moment to begin. Begin with the small ones and keep going, because the life you want is hidden in the habits you build. If there's one thing that changed everything for me financially, it was learning not to depend on just one stream of income. Depending on only one source is like trying to balance your future on a single leg. Sooner or later, it gives out. And here's the truth. Financial independence begins the moment you stop relying solely on earned income and start building income that works whether you do or not. That's when you move from survival to strategy, from pressure to power. I remember when I only had one income job, and don't get me wrong, I was grateful for it, but I was also trapped by it. If the company had a bad month, I had a bad month. If they let me go, I let go of everything, my plans, my peace of mind, my dreams. That's when I realized the wealthy don't think in terms of a paycheck. They think in terms of systems of income. Layers, safety nets, multiple streams. So I started simple. I began with a small side venture, nothing huge, just something I could manage part-time. I taught what I knew, I spoke, I sold small products, and that little stream started to flow. Then I took some of the income from that stream and invested it first in basic things I could understand, then gradually into more. I wasn't chasing big returns. I was chasing habits, discipline, learning how money could work on its own even while I was asleep. Then came royalties from writing, from recordings. Each stream took effort to set up, but once they were flowing, something incredible happened. I no longer panicked about the ups and downs of one stream. I had pillars beneath me, and each one strengthened the others. I had resilience. And with that resilience came confidence. The beautiful part is, you don't have to build it all at once, just one step at a time. Maybe it's starting a weekend business. Maybe it's taking a skill you already have and offering it as a service. Maybe it's finally putting a portion of your income into long-term investments every single month. One by one, you build them. Slowly, wisely, strategically. Don't get caught in the trap of waiting until everything's perfect. Start with what you have, where you are, and let each new stream take pressure off the others. Because when you build your life on multiple streams of income, you take control of your future. You're no longer at the mercy of a boss, a market, or a crisis. You're self-reliant, independent. And that's the goal, not just to make more, but to make freedom. That's what real wealth gives you. Choice, stability, options. And that's something worth building, starting now. If there's one thing I learned early and learned the hard way, it's that life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you're clear about. Wishes are weak. Goals are strong. Wishes are vague. Goals are vivid. And when it comes to building wealth, clarity is the golden key. It's not enough to say, I want to be financially free. You've got to ask, what does that mean exactly? How much do you want? By when? For what purpose? And what are you willing to do to get there? I remember when I first sat down and wrote out a financial goal with a deadline. It wasn't fancy, just a sheet of paper and a pen. But something shifted. Instead of just saying, I want to earn more, I wrote, I will earn $100,000 by the 31st of December of this year. And then I added, because I want to provide a better life for my family and prove to myself that I can become more than I've been. That clarity lit a fire in me, not because of the number, but because it had a timeline and a reason. Purpose is power. Then I broke it down. If that's the yearly goal, what's the monthly goal? The weekly, the daily? Suddenly, instead of a dream floating in the clouds, I had something I could walk toward. And every morning I'd review it. I didn't wait till the end of the year to check if I was on track. I looked at it every day. That's how you stay inspired. That's how you stay accountable. You see, the wealthy don't operate with hope. They operate with plans. They don't ask, wouldn't it be nice? They say, here's the goal, here's the deadline, and here's what I'm doing today to close the gap. It's not complicated, but it takes courage to be that honest with yourself, to say where you are, where you want to go, and what it's going to take. But that honesty is the foundation of freedom. And here's the most important part. Your goals must be meaningful to you, not to impress someone else, not to compete with the neighbor, but because they represent the kind of person you want to become. When your goals are tied to your identity, to your vision, they pull you forward even on hard days. They remind you why the sacrifice is worth it. So if you haven't done it yet, do it now. Write the number, set the date, define the why, break it into steps. And every morning, look yourself in the mirror and say, here's who I am. Here's what I want. And here's what I'm doing about it. Because the distance between where you are and the wealth you want isn't a mystery. It's a goal with a deadline waiting to be written. If all you do is gather wealth and never share the principles behind it, you've missed the deeper reward. Real wealth isn't just the numbers in your account. It's the knowledge, the habits, the mindset that got you there, and whether or not those things live on after you. If you want to build something that lasts, you've got to teach it, pass it down, multiply it through others. That's how you build legacy. I'll never forget a conversation I had with a young man who came up to me after a seminar. He said, my father was wealthy, but I never learned a thing from him. When he passed, the money went fast because none of us knew how to handle it. That's not a legacy, that's a missed opportunity. Contrast that with a family I knew who wasn't wealthy by financial standards. But every child knew how to budget, how to save, how to invest, because the father talked about money at the dinner table, gave them journals to track their spending, and made them earn, not just receive. Years later, they all built stable, independent lives, not because of what they were given, but because of what they were taught. See, when you teach someone else, it does something powerful. It sharpens your own understanding. When you mentor someone, you start living your own philosophy more intentionally. And when you invite others into your journey, you create accountability. That's why I always say, don't keep your wins a secret. Share your journey. Talk about the struggles, the decisions, the lessons. Not to boast, but to build a culture where wealth is understood and respected. You want to know the fastest way to reinforce your new money mindset? Talk about it. Tell your kids what you're doing and why. Sit down with your spouse or partner and plan your future together. Encourage your friends to track their finances, to read, to invest. Form a little circle of shared ambition, because wealth thrives in community. It dies in isolation. One of the greatest gifts I ever received wasn't money, it was when someone believed in me and took the time to guide me. They didn't just hand me a fish, they taught me how to fish. And because of that, I made it my mission to do the same for others. That's how I measure success, not just in dollars earned, but in people helped. So here's the challenge. Don't let your story end with you. Let it begin with you. Share what you're learning. Show others it's possible. Speak the language of responsibility and vision. Be the example your children can point to. Because in the end, wealth fades, but wisdom passed down that lasts forever. Most people chase money like it's a finish line. But the wealthy, they don't chase money, they chase service. They ask a different question. Not, how can I earn more? But how can I help more people? And when you shift that question, your entire approach changes. You stop thinking in terms of hours and paychecks, and you start thinking in terms of value, solutions, and scale. Let me take you back to when I first learned this. I was working harder than I ever had, but still just barely scraping by. Then I met a man who made 5 times what I did, yet seemed to have time, freedom, and peace of mind. I asked him, how do you do it? And he said, I don't work harder than you. I just solve a bigger problem for more people. That one line changed my life because I realized money isn't the goal. It's the result of solving problems at scale. Start with service. Every business, every fortune, every breakthrough begins with the simple act of helping someone. You see a need, you meet it. Maybe you're good at organizing, someone needs that. Maybe you can teach someone needs that. Maybe you know how to fix, write, build, cook someone somewhere is willing to pay for that. But here's the secret. Don't stop at helping one person. Ask, how can I solve this problem once? And let it help hundreds or thousands. That's when you move from income to wealth. I remember someone who used to give guitar lessons for $20 an hour. One student at a time. Then he filmed his lessons, packaged them, and put them online. Suddenly he wasn't earning $20 an hour, he was earning while he slept. That's the power of scale. It's the same effort, just multiplied through a smarter system. You don't need to be a genius or a tech expert to scale. Maybe it's recording your process and turning it into a course. Maybe it's using tools and platforms that reach more people than you ever could alone. Maybe it's building a team so others can carry out your vision. The tools are out there. The question is, are you thinking like someone who earns or someone who builds? I always say, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. And one of the most important is this. Wake up and ask yourself, who can I serve today? What problem can I solve better, faster, or at more scale? Because once you solve something well and find a way to deliver it repeatedly, you've planted the seed of wealth. You don't need luck or a miracle. You need a mindset that asks how to help, how to solve, and how to scale. That's how impact becomes income, and income becomes freedom.